This lesson introduces the Bitlocker technology and some of its configuration options. Bitlocker was initially introduced in Windows Vista as a means to protect the boot volume, i.e. the volume that contains the operating system and the applications. However, this was quickly expanded to also be able to protect data drives. This is a full volume encryption technology. This encrypts the entire volume, not just files or folders. And the goal of this is to provide protection if, for example, a laptop is stolen, if a desktop is stolen, even a server is taken maybe from a remote location where you don't have good physical security for the servers. And the way Bitlocker works is it encrypts the disk with something called a full volume encryption key. And this full volume encryption key is stored in something called the Trusted Platform Module, the TPM. And this is a physical component that exists on the motherboard of your computer. To access this full volume encryption key, which is basically protecting your data, there are a number of different options available. The first is you use the TPM only, so no user input. And you may wonder, well, what's the benefit of this? If as soon as I turn the machine on, that full volume encryption key is just taken from the TPM and used to decrypt the disk as I need it, what benefit is that bringing me? Well, the key point here is that disk that contains the operating system or the data has to physically be inside that machine, that desktop, that laptop, or that server. Consider a server scenario. It's very hard to sneak a server out of a data center, but it's very easy to take a hard disk out of a server. So TPM only provides protection from someone stealing a disk, but not the entire server or computer. Because without that TPM that contains the full volume encryption key, there's no way to get access to that data. Now I should point out the way Bitlocker works is it encrypts the entire volume. It does not decrypt the entire volume at machine startup. That would be highly inefficient. Instead, as you try to read data, the data you're reading is decrypted on the fly. When you write data, so a new file or you change data, it's encrypted as you perform that write I/O. But it's very, very minimal overhead. You're talking single digit I/O performance change. So this is really recommended all the time. The next scenario is a USB drive. So that USB drive contains a key that is used to decrypt the full volume encryption key from the TPM. So essentially I have to insert this USB key to be able to boot my machine. This really isn't very popular. It's the idea of sort of multi-form factor authentication that it has to be something I have, but inconvenient to have to insert a USB key. So more commonly, we have options to type in a PIN. So on a desktop or even a server, I use the function keys because function keys always give the same values, whereas the numeric keys may differ by country code. So use the function keys to type in a PIN. You can use a smart card. You can even do something called network unlock, and I'm going to talk about that more in a future lesson. Additionally, you can use an Active Directory account. This is really aimed at data volumes and it's aimed at cluster scenarios where we're using cluster shared volumes. For your data drives, you can also use a password. And group policy can be used to tune all of these different elements, how long the PIN or password needs to be, complexity if smart card is supported. So you have a lot of flexibility in how you can actually use this. Now, if you just go ahead and enable Bitlocker on a volume, you'll see it uses up all of this space. Because the way it works is it creates a temporary file that consumes all available free space because it can't encrypt empty space. So you'll see it create a temporary file, encrypt that file, and then delete it. What this has obviously done is if there was any remnants of data already on the disk, this would now be wiped out and that whole disk encrypted. So it gives you that great level of protection. So this is something you definitely want to use on your laptops. It's something you definitely want to use on your servers in branch office locations, but it does require that TPM. Although there are ways to work around that, which is what I'm going to show you in a future lesson. There's also a technology called Bitlocker to Go, which was introduced in Windows 7. And this is designed to enable you to encrypt USB type devices. So again, it's very common that people use a USB stick, they copy data to it. With Bitlocker to Go, I can encrypt that. Now on non-Windows 7 machines, there is a Bitlocker to Go reader available for XP and Vista that enables access to the data, but it cannot write to it. Additionally, there were some other changes made to Bitlocker. So you'll see there is an automatic hidden partition whenever you install Windows. So if I just look at a standard machine, I'm going to jump over and I'm going to run Disk Manager. And what you'll always see, unless you perform some kind of custom installation, so it's 350 megabytes. For Windows 8, it was 200 in Windows 7. The sizes varied over time. This is used because if you want to use Bitlocker, because Bitlocker encrypts the entire volume, I can't boot from an encrypted volume. I need some technology to enable me to unencrypt the drive. And so if you use Bitlocker, or in fact, Windows is automatically preparing your machine so you could use Bitlocker in the future, it creates this system reserved hidden partition. There's no drive letter. And this is your system drive, i.e. this is the volume that your machine boots from. It contains the bare necessity boot code to be able to then go and unencrypt the C volume and continue the boot. The reason it's actually got bigger is this volume also contains the recovery partition. So that's recovery information if your machine can't boot. All that recovery code is also written to this hidden partition, which is why we see it here. So you always want to make sure you have this, because if you don't, you have to jump through a lot of hoops to be able to repartition your machine to enable you to use Bitlocker, because you have to have this unencrypted space for the system partition. This is an optional feature on Windows Server. You actually have to enable this before you can use it. And I'm actually going to talk about this in detail in the next lesson. So this concludes the lesson on introducing Bitlocker and its options.